She slammed the door shut, the echo bouncing off the cramped apartment walls. Her hands trembled as she dropped her bag, the weight of another double shift at the diner pressing into her bones. The air smelled of stale coffee and her stepmother's cheap perfume. "Late again, girl." Her stepmother's voice sliced through the dim living room. Yvonne lounged on the sagging couch, a glass of wine in one hand, her phone in the other. Her eyes didn't lift from the screen. "You think those dishes wash themselves?" "I worked 16 hours today," she said, voice low, trying to keep the edge out. "I'm tired." Yvonne snorted, finally looking up. Her lips curled, sharp as a blade. "Tired? You don't get to be tired. You owe me. This roof, this food. Your father left me nothing but debts and you." Her chest tightened, but she swallowed the retort. She always did. Since her father's death 5 years ago, she'd learned to bite her tongue. The apartment, once filled with his laughter, was now a cage. She moved toward the kitchen, her sneakers squeaking on the worn linoleum. "Don't walk away from me," Yvonne snapped, standing now, her wine sloshing. "You think you're too good for this? Miss High and Mighty, working your little jobs, dreaming of escape? You're nothing without me." She stopped, hands gripping the counter. "I pay for this place. Every cent I make goes to you. And it's not enough." Yvonne's voice rose, shrill. "The landlord's breathing down my neck. The creditors won't stop calling. You think I chose this mess? Your father's gambling debts ruined us, and you're the only thing keeping us afloat." She turned, her eyes burning. "Don't talk about him like that." Yvonne laughed, cold and hollow. "Oh, sweet little Lila, still defending Daddy. He's gone, and you're stuck with me. So you'll do what I say, or you're out on the street." Lila's jaw clenched. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to run. But where would she go? The diner and the night shift at the gas station barely covered rent, and Yvonne's endless demands. Her dreams, college, a life beyond this city's gray edges, felt like a cruel joke. "Sit down," Yvonne said, her tone shifting, suddenly syrupy. She patted the couch. "We need to talk business." Lila stayed rooted, wary. Yvonne's kindness always came with strings. "What kind of business?" Yvonne's smile was all teeth. "The kind that saves us. I found a way to clear our debts. All of them." Lila's stomach twisted. "Ow! A man. A very rich man." Yvonne leaned forward, eyes glinting. "He's particular. Likes arrangements. One night, Lila. One night with him, and we're free. No more creditors. No more threats. You can have your life back." Lila's breath caught, her mind reeling. "You're joking." "Do I look like I'm joking?" Yvonne's voice hardened. "This isn't a request. You owe me. You owe this family." "Family?" Lila's voice broke. "You've never treated me like family. You've taken everything, my money, my time, your father's debts." Yvonne shouted, slamming her glass on the table. Wine splashed like blood. "You think I wanted to raise his brat? You think I enjoy this? You'll do this, Lila, or you're out. No money, no home, nothing." Lila's hands shook, her vision blurring. She saw her father's face, his warm smile, the way he'd promised her the world. Now it was just her, trapped in this apartment with a woman who'd sell her soul for $1. "Who is he?" she whispered. Yvonne's smile returned, triumphant. "You don't need his name. Just know he's powerful, and he's willing to pay generously." Lila's knees felt weak. She sank onto a chair, her mind racing. One night to erase the debts, to silence Yvonne's cruelty, to claw her way out of this life. But at what cost? Her pride? Her dignity? She thought of the diner, the endless grease stains, the leering customers. She thought of her father's grave, the flowers she couldn't afford to leave there. "What if I say no?" she asked, voice barely audible. Yvonne leaned close, her breath sour. "Then you're done. I'll throw you out tonight. No one will help you. Not your dead daddy, not your pathetic dreams. You're nothing without me." Lila's eyes met Yvonne's, searching for a shred of mercy. There was none. Her heart pounded, a trapped bird in her chest. She thought of the years she'd endured, insults, hunger, exhaustion. She thought of freedom, however fleeting. "When?" she asked, her voice flat. Yvonne's grin widened. "Tomorrow night. Or something nice. He's expecting you." Lila nodded, numb. She stood, moving toward her tiny bedroom, her steps heavy. The door clicked shut behind her, and she leaned against it, sliding to the floor. Her hands covered her face, but no tears came. Just a hollow ache. One night, she told herself. One night, and she'd be free. Or broken forever. The room was small, cluttered with second-hand furniture and memories of a life before Yvonne. A life where a father's voice still warmed the air. Where something nice, Yvonne had said. Lila's gaze drifted to the closet, where a single dress hung, a faded blue thing she'd worn to her father's funeral. Nice. She almost laughed. Nothing about this was nice. She stood, legs unsteady, and opened the closet. Her fingers brushed the dress, then pulled back as if it burned. She couldn't think about tomorrow, not yet. But Yvonne's threat, "You're out tonight," rang louder than her fear. The next evening, Lila stood in front of the cracked bathroom mirror, the blue dress clinging to her frame. She tried to tame her dark curls, but they spilled over her shoulders, defiant. Her reflection looked like a stranger, pale, eyes too wide, lips pressed tight. Yvonne banged on the door. "Hurry up. The car's waiting." Lila stepped into the living room, and Yvonne's eyes raked over her. "Good enough," she muttered, tossing a cheap clutch her way. "Don't embarrass me. Smile, nod, and don't screw this up." "Where am I going?" Lila asked, voice low, clutching the bag. "A restaurant. Fancy place downtown. He's expecting a business dinner." Yvonne's smile was too smooth, like oil on water. "Be charming. He's our ticket out." Lila's stomach churned. "What's his name?" Yvonne waved a hand. "Doesn't matter. Just do what he wants, and we're set." She pushed Lila toward the door. "Go." The driver's outside. The city blurred past the car window, neon lights smearing into streaks. Lila's fingers twisted the clutch, her mind racing. A business dinner. She wanted to believe it, but Yvonne's word from last night, one night with him, clawed at her. The driver, a silent man in a black suit, didn't glance back. When the car stopped outside a sleek high-rise restaurant, her breath caught. Glass walls glowed against the night, and men in suits and women in glittering dresses moved like they belonged. She didn't. Inside, the host led her to a private room. The air smelled of leather and expensive wine. A man stood by a floor-to-ceiling window, his back to her, city lights framing his broad shoulders. He turned, and her heart stuttered. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 30s, sharp jaw, dark hair, eyes like steel. His suit probably cost more than her year's wages. "You're Lila," he said, voice low, no question in it. He gestured to a chair. "Sit." She hesitated, then sat, her hands knotted in her lap. "You know my name? What's yours?" "Ethan Caldwell." His gaze held hers, unreadable. "Your guardian said you're here to discuss a deal." Lila's throat tightened. "Guardian?" Yvonne's lies were already unraveling. She said it was a business dinner. His lips twitched, not quite a smile. "It is, of sorts." He leaned back, studying her. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Her voice came out sharper than she meant. "Someone less guarded." He tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "Why are you here, Lila?" She swallowed, Yvonne's threats echoing. "To clear a debt. My stepmother's." He nodded, like he'd heard it before. "And you're willing to do what it takes?" Her pulse hammered. "What exactly are you asking for?" Ethan stood, crossing to her side of the table. He didn't touch her, but his presence was heavy, like gravity pulling her in. "One night," he said, voice soft but firm. "No strings, no complications. You walk away with your debts paid. Your family's safe." The room tilted. Yvonne's business dinner was a lie, just as she'd feared. Her hands shook, and she hid them under the table. "You think I'd sell myself?" "For money." His jaw tightened. "I'm not buying you. I'm offering a transaction. You need something. I want something." Her eyes burned, but she forced them to meet his. "And what do you want, Ethan Caldwell?" He paused, something flickering in his gaze. "Regret? Maybe, or something deeper." "You," he said simply, "for one night." Lila's breath caught, anger and shame twisting inside her. She wanted to run, to scream, to slap him. But Yvonne's voice hissed in her mind. "You're nothing without me." She thought of the apartment, the debts, the endless grind. One night. Could she survive it? What if I say no? She whispered. Ethan's eyes softened, just for a moment. Then you walk out. No one's forcing you. But they both knew that wasn't true. Yvonne's threats, the debts, they were chains. Lila stood, her chair scraping the floor. I need to think. He nodded, stepping back. You have until midnight. My driver will take you home. She left without another word, her heart pounding as she stepped into the night. The city's hum felt distant, her mind trapped in that room, in his words. One night, she hated him. She hated Yvonne. But most of all, she hated how part of her, a desperate, broken part, was already considering it. She stepped out, the driver pulling away without a word, leaving her alone under a flickering streetlight. Inside, Yvonne was waiting, perched on the couch like a vulture. Well, she demanded, eyes glinting. Did you seal the deal? Lila's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to tell Yvonne to choke on her greed. Instead, she said, he gave me until midnight. Yvonne's laugh was sharp, cutting. Midnight? Don't play hard to get, girl. You're not that special. Call him now. Say yes. Lila's hands clenched. I need time. Time. Yvonne stood, closing the distance. You think you have options? You think anyone else will save you? Call him, or I swear you're on the street tonight. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in. Lila's eyes burned, but she nodded, pulling out the card Ethan had slipped her. A single number, no name. Her fingers shook as she dialed, each ring a hammer to her chest. When his voice answered, low, steady, she nearly hung up. Lila, he said, not a question. I'll do it, she whispered, her voice cracking. One night. That's all. A pause, then, my driver will pick you up in an hour. The line went dead. Yvonne's grin was triumphant, but Lila didn't look at her. She walked to her room, shut the door, and leaned against it, her breath shallow. She didn't cry. She couldn't. Instead, she changed into the same blue dress, the fabric feeling like a betrayal against her skin. When the driver arrived, she followed him wordlessly, the city blurring again, her heart a knot of shame and defiance. The car stopped at a penthouse, its glass walls gleaming like a fortress. Ethan waited inside, standing by a bar, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He wore a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, no tie, a man at ease in his kingdom. His eyes met hers, sharp but guarded, like he was reading her soul. You came, he said, setting the glass down. You didn't leave me much choice, she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. He stepped closer, not touching, but close enough for her to smell cedar and whiskey. I meant what I said. You can leave. No one's forcing you. She laughed, bitter. My stepmother would disagree. His jaw tightened, something flickering in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or pity. This isn't about her. It's about you and me. One night. No lies, no promises. Just honesty. Honesty. She crossed her arms, shielding herself. You don't even know me. I don't believe in love, Lila. His voice was quiet, raw. But I believe in this. One night where we don't pretend. Her breath hitched. His words were a blade, cutting through her defenses. She wanted to hate him, to see him as just a rich man buying what he wanted. But his eyes, storm gray, haunted, held something deeper. Pain, maybe. A wound he wouldn't name. And after, she asked, voice barely above a whisper. You walk away. Debt cleared. Free. Free. The word tasted like ash. She nodded, her hands falling to her sides. Fine. Let's get it over with. He didn't move at first, just watched her, like he was waiting for her to bolt. Then he stepped closer, his fingers brushing her jaw, light as a breath. Don't rush, he murmured. Not tonight. Her heart pounded as he led her to a bedroom, its vastness swallowing her. The city sparkled beyond the windows, indifferent to her trembling. He stopped by the bed, turning to face her. Tell me to stop, and I will. She didn't. She couldn't. Not with Yvonne's threats, not with the weight of her father's debts. But more than that, there was something in his touch, gentle, almost reverent, that made her pause. She nodded, and he closed the distance, his lips brushing hers, soft at first, then deeper, like he was starving for something he couldn't name. The room faded, the world narrowing to his hands. his breath, the way he whispered her name like a confession. It wasn't just passion, it was raw, unraveling. His fingers traced her spine, and she shivered, not from cold, but from the way he looked at her, like she was more than a transaction. Her hands found his chest, feeling the heartbeat beneath, and for a moment she forgot why she was there. Forgot Yvonne, the debts, the shame. There was only him and her, and a tenderness neither expected. When their bodies met, it wasn't the cold exchange she'd feared. It was slow, deliberate, like he was memorizing her. His eyes held hers, and she saw something break in him, a wall crumbling, a guarded man letting go. She felt it too, a pull she couldn't name, a warmth that scared her. Her fingers dug into his shoulders, and he murmured something against her skin, too soft to catch. After, they lay in silence, the city's hum the only sound. His arm rested across her, heavy but not possessive. She stared at the ceiling, her chest tight with something she shouldn't feel. Not for him. Not for a man who'd bought her for a night. "You're quiet," he said, voice rough. "So are you," she replied, not looking at him. He shifted, propping himself on an elbow, his gaze searching her face. "Did I hurt you?" She shook her head, her throat burning. "No, it's just this wasn't supposed to feel like that." His eyes darkened, like he understood too well. It wasn't supposed to feel anything. She turned to him, their faces inches apart. "Then why does it?" He didn't answer, just brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, his touch lingering. For a moment, she thought he might say something real. But he only stood, pulling on his shirt, the walls going back up. "Get some rest," he said, voice clipped. "My driver will take you home in the morning." She nodded, curling into the sheets, his scent clinging to her. As he left the room, the door clicking shut, she felt the weight of what they'd done. Not just the act, but the way it had cracked something open in her, a hope she couldn't afford. She closed her eyes, willing sleep to come, but all she saw was his face, his eyes, the man who didn't believe in love but had held her like he did. Lila's eyes fluttered open, the city's gray light filtering through the penthouse windows. The sheets were cool, the space beside her empty. Ethan was gone. Her body ached, not from pain, but from the memory of his touch, the way his eyes had softened in the dark. She sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest, the silence louder than her thoughts. His scent lingered, cedar and whiskey, a cruel reminder of what she'd done. One night, she told herself, but it hadn't felt like a transaction. Not until now, alone in his bed, the weight of her choice crushing her. She dressed quickly, the blue dress wrinkled and out of place in the pristine room. Her hands shook as she smoothed it, her reflection in a nearby mirror showing a woman she barely recognized. Eyes shadowed, lips pressed thin. On the bedside table, a note waited, his handwriting sharp and precise. "The money's been transferred. Don't look for me. E." The words cut deeper than she expected, cold and final, like a door slamming shut. She crumpled the paper, her chest tight with something between anger and shame. The driver was waiting downstairs, silent as ever. The ride back to the apartment was a blur, the city's hum a dull roar in her ears. She kept replaying last night, his whispers, the way he'd held her, the flicker of something real in his eyes. Or had she imagined it? It wasn't supposed to feel anything, he'd said. Yet it had. And now, she was alone with that feeling, a dangerous ache she couldn't name. When she stepped into the apartment, Yvonne was sprawled on the couch, phone in hand, a smirk already forming. "Well, look who's back," she said, eyes glinting. "Check your account. He's paid up, more than I expected." Lila's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, her heart sinking as she opened the banking app. A notification stared back. A transfer, 6 figures, enough to clear Yvonne's debts, and then some. Her stomach twisted. "It's done," she said, voice flat. Yvonne laughed, sharp and cruel. "See? You're useful after all. Was it so hard, spreading your legs for a fortune?" Lila's hands clenched, nails biting her palms. "Don't talk to me like that." "Like what?" Yvonne stood, crossing the room, her wine-stained teeth bared. "Like you're a whore who saved us?" Be grateful, girl. You're free now. No more debts. No more excuses. You should thank me. Thank you. Lila's voice shook, anger rising like bile. You sold me. You lied to me. Yvonne shrugged, unbothered. And you went. Don't act like a victim. You wanted this, deep down. A way out. And you got it. Lila's vision blurred, her throat burning. She wanted to scream, to tear the smugness from Yvonne's face. But the truth in her stepmother's words stung worse than any insult. She had gone. She'd said yes. And now, the money sat in her account, a brand she couldn't wash off. She turned, storming to her room, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. Alone, she sank on her bed, the note's words echoing. Don't look for me. She didn't want to. She wanted to forget his face, his hands, the way he'd made her feel seen for the first time in years. But the guilt was a living thing, coiling around her heart. She'd sold herself, not just her body, but a piece of her soul. And for what? To save a woman who despised her? To escape a life that felt like a trap? She curled into a ball, her face buried in her knees. The tears came now, hot and silent, soaking the fabric of her dress. She hated Ethan for his cold note, for his ease in walking away. She hated Yvonne for her greed, her cruelty. But most of all, she hated herself for feeling something last night, for letting his touch linger in her bones. Across the city, Ethan stood in his office, the skyline sprawling beyond his desk. His fingers gripped a glass, the whiskey untouched. Lila's face haunted him, her guarded eyes, the way she'd trembled under his touch, the softness in her voice when she'd asked, "Why does it feel like that?" He'd meant to keep it simple, a transaction like always. One night, no strings. But her presence had cracked something in him, a wall he'd built after years of betrayal and loss. He'd left before dawn, unable to face her in the morning light. The note had been a coward's move, but he couldn't risk more. She was a stranger, a means to an end. Yet, as he'd watched her sleep, her dark curls spilling across the pillow, he'd felt something he hadn't in years. A pull, a need, a dangerous spark of something he refused to name. His phone buzzed, a message from his assistant confirming the transfer. It was done. She was gone. But as he stared at the city below, her voice echoed in his mind, soft and accusing. It wasn't supposed to feel like that. He set the glass down, his jaw tight. He'd forget her. He had to. But deep down, he knew she'd marked him, just as he'd marked her, a memory neither could erase. Back in her room, Lila stood, wiping her face. She wouldn't let this break her. She'd take the money, use it to escape Yvonne, to start over. She'd forget Ethan Caldwell, his gray eyes, his broken whispers. But as she packed a bag, her heart whispered a truth she couldn't ignore. Last night had changed her, and no amount of money could undo it. Lila's hands shook as she zipped the small duffel bag, her few belongings stuffed inside. The apartment was quiet. Yvonne passed out on the couch, an empty wine bottle tipped over beside her. The money from Ethan sat untouched in Lila's account, a weight she couldn't shake. She'd vowed to use it to escape, to build a life free of Yvonne's cruelty. Now, weeks later, she stood in her room, the bag slung over her shoulder, ready to leave. The city's hum filtered through the cracked window, a promise of something new. She didn't look back as she slipped out, the door clicking softly behind her. She found a job, administrative assistant at a luxury real estate firm downtown. The pay was enough to cover a cheap studio apartment, a place to start over. It was her lifeline, her chance to bury the memory of that night, of Ethan's cold note. Don't look for me. She tried to forget him, but his face lingered, those gray eyes, the way his touch had felt like a confession. She pushed the thought down, focusing on the future. A new job, a new life. No more Yvonne, no more debts. Her first day at Caldwell Enterprises was a blur of glass walls and polished floors. The office buzzed with quiet efficiency, employees moving like cogs in a machine. Lila adjusted her thrift store blazer, feeling out of place among the tailored suits. Her desk was in a corner, a stack of files waiting. She was early, her nerves a tight knot as she sorted paperwork, trying to blend in. The other assistants barely glanced her way, their voices low, clipped professional. Then the air shifted. A hush fell over the floor, heads turning toward the elevator. Lila didn't look up, focused on a spreadsheet, until a shadow fell across her desk. She froze, her skin prickling. Slowly, she raised her eyes, and the world tilted. Ethan Caldwell stood there, his gray suit sharp as a blade, his gaze locked on her. Those same eyes, stormy, unreadable, the ones that had haunted her for weeks. Her breath caught, her heart slamming against her ribs. He was her boss. The man who'd paid for her, who'd left her with a note and a hollow ache, was here. "Lila," he said, his voice low, controlled, but with an edge she couldn't place. "You the new hire?" She nodded, her throat dry, unable to form words. His presence filled the room, commanding, magnetic, just as it had that night. But now, in the harsh light of the office, he was a stranger again, a billionaire, untouchable, her employer. Her hands gripped the edge of her desk, anchoring her. He didn't move, his eyes searching hers. "My office." "Now." The other assistants exchanged glances, but Lila stood, her legs unsteady, and followed him. The walk to his corner office felt endless, the glass walls reflecting her pale face. Inside, he shut the door, the click anno domino click of the lock echoing in the silence. "Explain," he said, leaning against his desk, arms crossed. His face was a mask, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of something, surprise, maybe, or anger. She swallowed hard, her voice barely steady. "I didn't know you owned this company." His jaw tightened. Clearly, he stepped closer, his gaze pinning her. "Why are you here, Lila?" "I needed a job," she said, lifting her chin, defiance masking her panic. I didn't know it was yours." He studied her, his expression unreadable. "You expect me to believe that?" "It's the truth." Her voice shook, but she held his gaze. "I'm trying to move on. I didn't come looking for you." His eyes narrowed, like he was dissecting her words. "Move on? From what?" Her cheeks burned, the memory of their night flooding back. His hands, his whispers, the betrayal of his note. "From you," she said, the words spilling out. "From that night." His face didn't change, but his fingers twitched, a crack in his composure. "You got what you wanted. The money." She flinched, anger rising. "You think I wanted that? You think I had a choice?" He stepped closer, his voice low, dangerous. "You said yes." "Because I had to." Her hands clenched, her voice rising. "You don't know what it's like being trapped, being told you're nothing unless you." She stopped, her breath ragged. His eyes softened, just for a moment, and she hated it. She didn't want his pity. "Tell me," he said, his voice quieter now, almost gentle. "What did she do to you?" She laughed, sharp and bitter. "What didn't she do? She took everything, my home, my life, my—" She stopped, her throat closing. "And then she sold me to you." His jaw tightened, a shadow crossing his face. "I didn't know." "Didn't you?" She stepped forward, her voice trembling with rage. "You paid for me. You knew I was desperate." He didn't flinch, but his eyes darkened, a storm brewing. "I thought you wanted it. A clean deal. No strings." Her chest ached, the truth too heavy to voice. That it hadn't felt clean, that it had felt real, that it had broken something in her. "You left me a note," she said instead, her voice cracking. "Don't look for me." He looked away, his hand raking through his hair. "I had to." "Why?" The word burst out, raw and pleading. He met her eyes, and for a moment she saw it again, that flicker of pain, the same one from that night. "Because I felt too much," he said, so softly she almost missed it. Her heart stuttered, but she forced it down. "Don't," she said, stepping back. "Don't say that. Not now. Lila." He reached for her, but she jerked away. "I'm here to work," she said, her voice hard. "That's all. You're my boss now. Nothing else." His hand dropped, his face closing off. "Fine. Get back to your desk." She turned, her legs shaking as she walked out. The office buzzed around her, oblivious to the storm in her chest. She sat at her desk, staring at the files, her mind a tangle of guilt, anger, and that dangerous ache she'd sworn to bury. He remembered her. He'd felt too much, but it didn't matter. She'd rebuild. She'd forget him again. But as she glanced at his office door, her heart whispered that forgetting Ethan Caldwell was impossible. The office hummed around her, phones ringing, footsteps clicking on marble. Her co-workers whispered about Ethan, his wealth, his ruthlessness, the women who'd tried and failed to crack his icy exterior. Lila kept her head down, her forced smile a shield. She couldn't afford to care about him. Not after that night. Not after his note. But his words echoed, and her traitorous heart clung to them. Ethan watched her from his office, the glass wall giving him a clear view of her desk. Lila's dark curls fell over her shoulder as she worked, her jaw tight, her movements deliberate. She wasn't like the others, not polished, not scheming. He'd thought her a gold digger, a desperate girl trading one night for a payout. But in his office, her anger, her pain, had been raw real. You paid for me. You knew I was desperate. Her words cut deeper than he'd expected, stirring guilt he hadn't felt in years. He shouldn't care. He'd built his empire by staying detached, by burying the betrayal that had scarred him, a fiancé who'd used him, a family who'd bled him dry. Lila was supposed to be a transaction, nothing more. But that night had shifted something. Her touch, her whispered, "Why does it feel like that?" It haunted him. Now, seeing her in his office, fragile yet defiant, he couldn't look away. He wanted to protect her, to know her, to unravel the fire behind her guarded eyes. "Lila," he said, stepping out of his office, his voice cutting through the hum. Heads turned, but he ignored them, his gaze fixed on her. "I need you in the penthouse project. Conference room, 10 minutes. She looked up, her eyes wary. "Me? I'm just." "You're capable," he said, cutting her off. "Be there." She nodded, her lips tight, and he walked away, his chest tight. He didn't need her on the project. He needed her close. In the conference room, Lila sat at the edge of the table, her notepad clutched like a lifeline. Ethan stood at the head, briefing the team, his voice steady but his eyes drifting to her. She took notes, her pen moving fast, her face a mask of focus. But her hands trembled, and he noticed. When the meeting ended, he lingered as the others filed out. "You're doing well," he said, his tone softer than he meant. She didn't look up, her pen still moving. "Just doing my job." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "You don't have to hide from me." Her pen stopped, her eyes snapping to his. "I'm not hiding. I'm working, like you told me to." There was that fire, quiet but fierce. He leaned against the table, his voice low. "You're angry. I get it. But you don't have to go through this alone." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "Alone? That's all I've ever been. You don't get to play savior now." His jaw tightened. "I'm not trying to save you. I'm trying to—" He stopped, unsure of the word. "Help? Understand?" He didn't know. But the thought of her walking away, of her pain, gnawed at him. "Try to what?" She pressed, standing now, her eyes blazing. "Fix what you broke. You paid for me, Ethan. You left me a note like I was nothing. And now you want to what? Be my friend." He flinched, her words ablaze. "I didn't know," he said, his voice rough. "I didn't know about your stepmother, about what she—" "Stop." She held up a hand, her voice trembling. "Don't make this about her. You made a choice to." He stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her eyes, the pain she tried to hide. "So did you," he said softly. "And I felt it, Lila. That night. It wasn't nothing." Her breath hitched, and for a moment, they stood frozen, the air thick with what neither would say. Then her phone buzzed, shattering the moment. She glanced at it, her face paling. "What is it?" he asked, his voice sharp. "Nothing," she said too quickly, shoving the phone in her pocket. But he saw the fear in her eyes, the way her hands shook as she gathered her things. "Lila," he said, his hand brushing her arm. She jerked away, and he felt it like a slap. "If you're in trouble." "I'm fine," she snapped, but her voice cracked. She turned, leaving the room, her steps quick, unsteady. Back at her desk, Lila's heart raced. The text was from Yvonne. "Don't think you're free. I know where you work. Screw this up, and you're done." Her fingers tightened around the phone, her stomach churning. She thought the job, the money, would be her escape. but Yvonne's claws were still in her, sharp and unrelenting. She forced a smile as a co-worker passed, her chest tight with panic. Ethan watched from his office, his hands clenched. He'd seen the fear in her eyes, the way she'd shut him out. He wanted to follow her, to demand answers, but her words stung. You made a choice too. He had. And now, seeing her pain, he felt the weight of it. He didn't know her story, not fully, but he knew she was trapped, and he was starting to realize he'd do anything to free her, even if it meant facing the parts of himself he'd buried long ago. That night, Lila sat in her new studio apartment, the single bulb casting shadows on the bare walls. Yvonne's text glowed on her phone, a reminder she'd never be free. She thought of Ethan, his intensity, his unexpected gentleness. I felt it, Lila. His words stirred something dangerous, a hope she couldn't afford. But as she curled up on her thin mattress, the memory of his touch warred with Yvonne's threats, leaving her torn between fear and a longing she couldn't shake. His confession had stirred a dangerous hope, one she tried to bury under forced smiles and late-night shifts at Caldwell Enterprises. But Yvonne's threat loomed, a reminder that freedom was a lie. She curled tighter, the ache of that night with Ethan, his touch, his gaze, clashing with the dread Yvonne's words reignited. Sleep didn't come. Across town, Ethan stood in his penthouse, the city's lights sprawling below, indifferent to the storm in his chest. Lila's face haunted him, her fire, her pain, the way she'd flinched when he'd touched her arm. You made a choice too. Her words had cut deep, exposing a guilt he hadn't faced in years. He'd thought her a transaction, but she was a wound, bleeding into his carefully guarded life. Her fear in the conference room, the way her hands shook at that text, not at him. She was hiding something, someone. He needed to know. He grabbed his keys, driven by an impulse he couldn't name. His car cut through the city, the address from her employee file burned into his mind. He parked across from her building, a crumbling walk-up in a neighborhood that made his skin crawl. He shouldn't be here. She'd told him to stay away, to be her boss, nothing more. But as he watched her window, a dim light flickering, he couldn't leave. Not until he understood. Lila stepped out, her coat pulled tight against the chill, a bag slung over her shoulder. She moved fast, head down, like she was running from something. Ethan followed, keeping his distance, his heart pounding. She slipped into a diner, its neon sign buzzing. Through the window, he saw her slide into a booth, her face pale, her hands twisting a napkin. Then another figure appeared, Yvonne, her stepmother, all sharp edges and sneering lips. Ethan's blood ran cold. He couldn't hear them, but Yvonne's gestures were venomous, her finger jabbing at Lila, who shrank into the booth. Ethan's hands clenched, rage rising as he pieced it together. The business dinner, the money, Lila's desperation, it all led back to this woman. He pushed through the diner's door, the bell jangling, and strode to their booth. Get away from her, he said, his voice low, lethal. Yvonne's head snapped up, her smirk faltering. Who the hell are you? Lila's eyes widened, panic flashing. Ethan, don't. I said, get away, he repeated, stepping closer, his presence a wall between them. Yvonne laughed, but it was brittle. Oh, the billionaire himself. Come to play, hero. You already got what you paid for. His fist tightened, but he didn't move. You sold her. You used her. Yvonne leaned back, unfazed. She's my stepdaughter. I did what I had to. Her father left us in debt, gambling, bad deals. She owed me. Lila's voice broke through, small but sharp. I owed you nothing. Ethan turned, her words a knife. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set, defiance cutting through her fear. You lied to me, she said to Yvonne. You told me it was a dinner, a deal. You made me. I saved us. Yvonne snapped, standing now, her face flushed. You think you're innocent? You went to him. You took the money. Ethan's rage boiled over. Enough. He grabbed Yvonne's arm. Not hard, but enough to make her freeze. You're done hurting her. Walk away, or I'll make sure you lose everything. Yvonne yanked free, her eyes narrowing. You think you know her? Ask her about her father. Ask him about his promises. Lila's breath hitched, her gaze snapping to Ethan. What's she talking about? Ethan's chest tightened, a memory he'd buried clawing its way up. He looked at Lila, her eyes searching his, and the truth he'd avoided spilled out. "I knew your father," he said, his voice rough. "Years ago. He worked for me, before I built the company. He was a friend." Lila's face paled, her hands gripping the table. "You knew him?" He nodded, guilt choking him. "He asked me to look out for you if anything happened to him. I promised I would. But I didn't. I was young, building my empire. I forgot." Her eyes glistened, betrayal cutting through. "You forgot me, Lila." He reached for her, but she pulled back, shaking her head. "You both used me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You and her. You knew who I was, and you still." "I didn't know," he said, desperate. "Not until I saw you again in my office. I didn't connect the name, not at first." She stood, her chair scraping, her bag clutched tight. "I can't do this." She pushed past him, past Yvonne, and out into the night. Ethan started after her, but Yvonne's voice stopped him. "Let her go. She's nothing but trouble." He turned, his eyes cold. "If you come near her again, I'll destroy you." Yvonne smirked, but it wavered. He didn't wait for her response, chasing Lila into the street. She was gone, swallowed by the city's shadows. His chest ached, her words echoing. "You both used me." He'd failed her father, failed her. But as he stood under the flickering streetlights, he swore he'd find her, protect her, even if she hated him for it. The city's cold bit at Lila's skin as she stumbled through the streets, her bag slung over her shoulder, the diner's neon glow fading behind her. Ethan had known her father, had promised to protect her, yet he'd paid for her, left her with a note like she was nothing. She wiped her eyes, the tears hot against the chilly night. She couldn't go back to her apartment, not with Yvonne's threats still burning. She didn't know where she was going, just away. Her feet carried her to a park, its benches empty under flickering streetlights. She sank onto one, her bag dropping to the ground, her hands trembling. The memory of Ethan's eyes, heavy with guilt, clawed at her. "I didn't know, not until I saw you again." She wanted to believe him, to cling to the tenderness of that night. But the truth was a blade. He'd known her father, failed his promise, and still taken her to his bed. Her fingers dug into her palms, the pain grounding her. She'd trusted him, just for a moment, and it had cost her everything. Her phone buzzed, Ethan's name flashing. She ignored it, her heart pounding. She couldn't face him, not now, maybe not ever. The city's hum felt distant, her world narrowing to the ache in her chest. She thought of her father, his warm smile, his promises of a better life. Ethan had known him, had been part of that world, and he'd let her fall into Yvonne's trap. She stood, her legs shaky, and started walking again, the need to escape driving her forward. Weeks passed in a haze. Lila quit Caldwell Enterprises, leaving a resignation email she didn't expect Ethan to read. She found a waitressing job at a small cafe, its dim lights and worn tables a far cry from the glass towers of his empire. She rented a cheaper room, barely a closet, but it was hers. Yvonne's text stopped, likely because of Ethan's threat, but the silence didn't ease Lila's fear. She felt unmoored, haunted by his confession, by the night that had felt like more than a deal. She pushed it down, focusing on survival, on rebuilding the pieces of herself. But something was wrong. Her body felt heavy, her stomach uneasy. At first, she blamed stress, exhaustion, the weight of betrayal. Then one morning, nausea hit hard, sending her to the bathroom. She stared at the mirror, her face pale, her eyes wide with dread. A drugstore test confirmed it. 2 pink lines stark against the white stick. Pregnant. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, the test clattering into the sink. Ethan's child, the man who'd broken her heart, who'd known her father and still shattered her trust. She pressed a hand to her stomach, her breath shallow. She couldn't tell him. He didn't deserve to know, not after everything. But the thought of raising a child alone, in this city, with Yvonne's shadow still looming, terrified her. She thought of her father, how he'd wanted a future for her, and now she carried a life tied to the man who'd failed them both. Tears fell, silent and heavy, as she curled into herself, the weight of her choice. I'll do it. Now a permanent mark. Across the city, Ethan sat in his office, the skyline a blur beyond the glass. Lila's resignation email stared back from his screen, her words curt. I can't stay. Please don't contact me. He hadn't. Not after she'd run from the diner, her voice echoing. You both used me. But he couldn't let her go. Not completely. He'd hired a private investigator, discreetly, to ensure Yvonne stayed away. The reports confirmed Lila was safe, working at a cafe, living in a rundown building. Each update twisted the knife deeper. He'd failed her, just as he'd failed her father years ago, too consumed by his own ambition to keep his promise. He stood, pacing, his hands raking through his hair. Her face haunted him. Her fire, her pain, the way she'd looked at him that night, like he was more than a transaction. He'd meant to protect her, to keep her close at the company, but he'd only pushed her further away. I felt too much. He'd admitted it, and she'd rejected him. But the thought of her alone, carrying the weight of her stepmother's cruelty, gnawed at him. He wanted to find her, to beg for forgiveness, but her words held him back. You're my boss now. Nothing else. Lila sat in the cafe's back room, her shift over, the test hidden in her bag. She couldn't keep it. Not here, not like this. But the idea of letting go, of ending it, felt like another betrayal, this time to herself. She thought of Ethan, his gray eyes, the way he'd whispered her name. She hated him, hated the hope he'd stirred, the life now growing inside her. But as she touched her stomach, a quiet resolve settled. She'd survive this, alone as always. She'd protect this child, give it the love her father had given her. Ethan didn't get to break her again. She stood, slipping out into the night, the city's lights indifferent to her resolve. But as she walked, a shadow lingered in her mind. Ethan's guilt, his confession, the man he'd hidden behind his cold exterior. She pushed it away, but it clung, a whisper that maybe, just maybe, he was as broken as she was. Lila's footsteps crunched on the gravel path, the seaside town's salty air sharp in her lungs. The ocean stretched before her, gray and restless, mirroring the storm she carried. Months had passed since she'd fled the city, her pregnancy a secret she guarded fiercely. Her hand rested on the slight swell of her belly, hidden under a loose sweater, as she walked back to her rented cottage. She'd vowed to forget him, to raise this baby alone, but his shadow lingered, a whisper she couldn't silence. The cottage came into view, its weathered wood glowing under the dusk. She paused, her breath catching. A figure stood by the door, tall, unmistakable. Ethan. His coat was open, his hair disheveled, his gray eyes fixed on her. Her heart lurched, anger and longing twisting together. She wanted to run, to scream, but her feet carried her forward, her hand tightening on her bag. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice sharp though it trembled. I found you, he said, his voice low, raw, like he hadn't slept in weeks. I had to. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes narrowing. I told you not to contact me. I know. He stepped closer, his hands at his sides, no longer the commanding billionaire, but a man stripped bare. I couldn't stay away, Lila. Not anymore. Her chest tightened, the memory of their last meeting flooding back. His confession in the diner, her accusation. You both used me. She shook her head, stepping back. You don't get to do this. You don't get to show up and act like you care. I do care, he said, his voice breaking. I've cared since that night, since I saw you in my office, since I learned what she did to you. I was wrong, Lila. I failed you and your father. Let me make it right. Her laugh was bitter, her hand instinctively brushing her stomach. Make it right? You can't. You knew him, Ethan. You promised to protect me. And instead, she stopped, her throat burning, unable to say the rest. He flinched, his eyes dark with guilt. I know. I was selfish, caught up in my own world. But I'm here now. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to prove I'm not that man anymore. She stared at him, her resolve wavering. His face was different, haggard, unguarded, the arrogance gone. But trust was a fragile thing, and he'd shattered hers. Go home, Ethan, she said, brushing past him to the door. I don't need you. He didn't follow, but his voice stopped her. Yvonne's gone. I made sure of it. She froze, her hand on the doorknob. What? I tracked her down, he said, his voice steady now. Paid off every debt she claimed, every creditor she used to control you. She's out of your life, Lila. She can't touch you anymore. Her breath caught, a mix of relief and rage flooding her. You think that fixes everything? You think money solves what you did? No, he said, stepping closer, his eyes pleading. But it's a start. I'm not here to buy you, Lila. I'm here because I can't sleep, can't think without seeing your face, without hating myself for what I let happen. Her eyes burned, tears she refused to shed. She wanted to hate him, to cling to the anger that had kept her strong. But his voice, his presence, stirred the part of her that remembered his touch, his whispered confessions. She turned, her hand still on the knob. Why now? Why can't you just leave me alone? Because I love you, he said, the words raw, unguarded. I didn't know it then, but I felt it that night. I've been running from it, but I can't anymore. Her heart stuttered, the words hitting like a wave. She wanted to believe him, but the fear of betrayal held her back. You don't know what love is, she whispered, opening the door. Stay away, Ethan. She shut it behind her, leaning against the wood, her breath ragged. His words echoed. I love you. And she hated how they warmed her, how they cracked the walls she'd built. She touched her belly, the life inside her a secret she wasn't ready to share. Not with him. Not yet. Days turned to weeks, and Ethan didn't leave. He rented a house nearby, his presence quiet but constant. He didn't push, didn't demand. Instead, he showed up at the bookstore, buying stacks of novels he never read, leaving tips too large for her pride to accept. He fixed the cottage's leaking roof when she wasn't home, paid for a neighbor's kid to mow her lawn. Small acts, silent apologies, each one chipping away at her resolve. One evening, she found him on the beach, staring at the waves, his coat flapping in the wind. She stopped, her heart pounding. You're still here, she said, her voice softer than she meant. He turned, his eyes catching the fading light. I told you, I'm not going anywhere. She crossed her arms, the wind tugging at her hair. I don't trust you, Ethan. I can't. I know, he said, his voice gentle. But I'll wait. As long as it takes. She looked away, the ocean blurring through unshed tears. Her hand brushed her stomach, the secret she carried heavy. She wanted to tell him, to see his face, but fear held her back. Instead, she said, I'm keeping it. The baby. His eyes widened, a flicker of shock, then something softer. Hope. Maybe. Lila. Don't, she said, stepping back. This doesn't change anything. Not yet. He nodded, his hands in his pockets, his face open, vulnerable. I'll be here, he said. For both of you. She turned, walking back to the cottage, her heart a tangle of fear and longing. Ethan's presence was a quiet promise, one she wasn't ready to accept. But as the waves crashed behind her, she felt the first stirrings of something new. Not trust, not yet, but a possibility, fragile and unformed, that maybe he could earn it. The wind carried the ocean's salt as Lila walked back to her cottage, her footsteps heavy on the gravel path. Ethan's words, I'll be here. For both of you, hung in the air, a quiet vow she wasn't ready to trust. Her hand rested on her belly, the baby's faint flutter a reminder of the secret she'd revealed. She'd told him to stay away, but his presence lingered, steady and unyielding, like the waves crashing beyond her window. She shut the cottage door, leaning against it, her heart a tangle of fear, hope, and the fragile possibility he'd planted. I love you, he'd said, and though she'd pushed him away, the words had taken root, stirring a longing she couldn't silence. Months passed, the seaside town softening around her. Her belly grew, her body slowing, but her resolve hardened. She worked at the bookstore, stacking shelves, ignoring the whispers of locals who noticed her solitude. Ethan didn't push, but he was there, fixing her fence, leaving groceries on her porch, watching from a distance when she walked the beach. Each act was a silent apology, a bridge he built without demanding she cross. She hated how it softened her, how his gray eyes, once cold, now held a warmth she couldn't ignore. One evening, as rain battered the cottage, a sharp pain doubled her over. She gasped, clutching the counter, her phone slipping from her hand. The baby. Too soon. Panic surged, but before she could call for help, a knock came at the door. Ethan stood there, soaked, his face taut with worry. "I saw your light flicker," he said, his voice urgent. "Are you okay?" She shook her head, another pain stealing her breath. "It's the baby." He didn't hesitate, scooping her up, his arms steady despite the storm. "I've got you," he murmured, carrying her to his car. The drive to the hospital was a blur, rain lashing the windshield, his hand gripping hers as she breathed through the pain. "Stay with me, Lila," he said, his voice a lifeline. She nodded, fear and trust warring within her. At the hospital, he never left her side. Hours blurred, pain and fear giving way to exhaustion. But Ethan was there, his hand in hers, his voice soft, steady. "You're strong," he whispered, brushing damp hair from her forehead. "You can do this." She wanted to hate him, to cling to the betrayal, but his touch anchored her, his eyes holding a promise he hadn't broken. When the baby's cry pierced the room, Lila's tears fell, relief and love flooding her. A girl, small and perfect, was placed in her arms. She looked down, her heart swelling, and then at Ethan. His face was raw, eyes glistening as he stared at the child. Their child. "She's beautiful," he said, his voice thick. "Like you." Lila's throat tightened, the weight of the past months crashing in. She'd run from him, from the pain of his betrayal. But here he was, holding her hand, fighting for her in a way no one ever had. "Why?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why did you stay?" He knelt beside her bed, his hand still clasping hers. "Because I love you, Lila. Not the girl I paid for, not the one I failed. You, the woman who fought, who survived, who's stronger than I'll ever be." Her eyes searched his, looking for the lie, the manipulation. But all she saw was truth, raw and unguarded. "You knew my father," she said, her voice trembling. "You broke your promise." "I did," he said, his voice breaking. "And I'll spend my life making it right. For you, for her." He glanced at the baby, his hand brushing her tiny fingers. "I don't deserve you, Lila, but I'm here and I'm not leaving." She looked down at her daughter, her dark curls so like her own, and felt the walls she'd built begin to crumble. He'd paid off Yvonne's debts, faced her stepmother's cruelty, stayed through her rejection. He wasn't the man who'd left her a note, "Don't look for me," but the one who'd found her, who'd fought for her, who held her now. "I was so angry," she said, tears spilling. "I thought you saw me as nothing." "Never," he said, his voice fierce. "That night, I thought it would end us. But it was the beginning of everything." He leaned closer, his forehead touching hers, his breath warm. "I saw you, Lila. I've always seen you." Her heart ached, not with pain, but with a love she'd fought to deny. She reached for him, her hand trembling as it cupped his face. "I see you too," she whispered, the words a release, a choice. He kissed her, soft and slow, a promise sealed in the quiet of the hospital room. The baby stirred, her tiny hand curling around Lila's finger, and for the first time, Lila felt whole. Not broken, not used, but loved. She looked at Ethan, his eyes locked on hers, and saw the man who'd fought for her, not with money or power, but with his heart. As dawn broke, painting the room gold, Lila held her daughter, Ethan's arm around them both. The pain of Yvonne's cruelty, the betrayal of that first night, the weight of her father's loss, they didn't vanish, but they faded, softened by the love that had grown in their place. She thought of that night, the one she'd thought would ruin her, and realized it had led her here, to a family, to a future. "Her name," Lila said, her voice steady. "It's Hope." Ethan's smile was soft, his eyes glistening. "Perfect," he murmured, kissing her forehead. "Just like her mother." The ocean's rhythm carried through the open window, a reminder of the life they'd built. From deception and heartbreak, they'd found healing, love, a forever neither had expected. Lila leaned into Ethan, hope cradled between them, and let the past fall away, The night that had changed her life, now the foundation of everything that mattered.